Good morning, Sham Stars. In previous video of chapter 14, Respiration in Plants, we discussed electron transport system. In this presentation, we will talk about respiratory balance sheet, respiratory pathway, that is an amphibolic pathway, and respiratory quotient. We know that ATP is generated in the process of respiration. There is a net gain of 38 ATP molecules during aerobic respiration of 1 molecule of glucose. But in most eukaryotic cells, 2 molecules of ATP are required for transporting the NADH produced in glycolysis into the mitochondria for further oxidation. Net gain of ATP here is 36 molecules. This slide shows summary of cell respiration. In glycolysis, 4 ATP molecules and 2 NADH and 2 pyruvate molecules are formed, and the location of the entire process of glycolysis, that is a cytoplasm. Acetyl coenzyme formation, it occurs in mitochondrial matrix with the production of 2 molecules of NADH and 2 molecules of carbon dioxide. Krebs cycle or TCA cycle occurs in mitochondrial matrix with the production of 2 molecules of ATP, 6 molecules of NADH, 2 molecules of FADH2 and production of 4 molecules of carbon dioxide. Electron transport system or oxidative phosphorylation. It occurs in inner membrane of mitochondria with the production of 34 ATP molecules and water molecule. The respiratory pathway is also considered as an amphibolic pathway rather than a catabolic one. Since respiration involves breakdown of organic compounds, it has been considered as catabolic process and the respiratory pathway as the catabolic pathway. But different substances enter the pathway as respiratory substrates, and certain intermediates of the respiratory pathway are also withdrawn for synthesis of other compounds. Because of respiratory pathway involves both anabolism, that is synthesis, and catabolism, breakdown, it is better called an amphibolic pathway. As shown in the figure, other than carbohydrates, fats and proteins are also used as substrates. Fats would need to be broken down into glycerol and fatty acids first. If fatty acids were to be respired, they would first be degraded to acetyl coenzyme and enter the pathway. Glycerol would enter the pathway after being converted into phosphoglyceraldehyde. The proteins would be degraded by proteases, and the individual amino acids, depending on their structure, would enter the pathway at some stage within the Krebs cycle or even as a pyruvate or acetyl coenzyme. When the organism needs to synthesize fatty acids, acetyl coenzyme would be withdrawn from the respiratory pathway for it. Hence, the respiratory pathway comes into the picture both during breakdown and synthesis of fatty acids. Similarly, during breakdown and synthesis of protein too. Respiratory intermediates from the link. Breaking down processes within the living organism is catabolism and synthesis is anabolism. Because the respiratory pathway is involved in both anabolism and catabolism, it would be better to consider as the amphibolic pathway. Now let's understand respiratory quotient. The respiratory quotient or RQ is defined as the ratio of carbon dioxide produced to oxygen consumed per unit time by an organism. Oxygen uptake during respiration can be measured using a respirometer. The respiratory quotient varies with the respiratory substrate. The RQ is 1 if a carbohydrate is the respiratory substrate because equal volumes of carbon dioxide and oxygen are evolved and consumed respectively. The RQ is less than 1 when fats form the respiratory substrate. The RQ is 0.9 when proteins form the respiratory substrate. The respiratory quotient for organic acids is more than 1. And RQ is infinite in case of anaerobic respiration because carbon dioxide will be evolved but no oxygen is consumed. So children, this is all about respiration in higher plants. Thank you, Shem Stars. That's all for today. You can drop your queries on Google Classroom. Take care.